see this screen? Yes?
Sure
Okay.
can.
Okay, I just put that up there to remind us why we're here, US election 2020. Let me see if I can advance this. Okay, a little glitch here. Okay, I promise to be serious. Other than Tracy, I think nobody else is drinking, and so we'll just stick to the topic of serious astrology. I had about 15 years or more of professional practice in Western astrology and subsequently 20 plus years in Vedic astrology. And I feel I could work both sides of the street, but my preference is, you know, for the last 20 years is to work Vedic astrology. So as you know, there are differences between Western and Vedic astrology, and I'm not going to torture anybody by challenging you to understand what's going on in either of the Vedic charts, North or South Indian. So out of great mercy, I'm going to use standard circular charts like this for Donald Trump. And I've stripped it down to the basics that all Vedic astrologers use, which are the 7 classical visible planets and the north and south nodes, which I will henceforth refer to only as Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon, which are regarded in Vedic astrology as being every bit as important as any of those visible planets. So, you know, I've stripped out aspect lines in this too, just to keep it simple, and also because there are different aspects within Vedic astrology. Some are similar, but many are different from what is in Western astrology. And rather than try to explain that as I go, please take my word for it if I say this is aspected by that, but not by this, so it goes. So, you know, you'll know differences right away, because remember, this is a sidereal chart. So Donald Trump, in this case, is got a Leo rising. I guess he did it. He would have been marginal. I've forgotten already. Is he late Leo or early Virgo in Western? But in any event, in sidereal, he is Leo rising. So here's an interesting corroboration of, you know, behaviors. Trump was born very close to an eclipse. Here you see the nodal axis, and here you see both the sun and the moon extremely close to the nodal axis. Sun has what we call directional strength in the 10th house. Moon has directional strength in the 4th. Moon is full, but moon is debilitated. And this is the most complex planet in his chart. Trump has what we call a draconic bowl configuration, where the nodes of the moon approximate the rim of a bowl, effectively dividing the chart in two. And all of the visible planets are on one side or the other. Not entirely literally, because you can see the moon is just out of that axis, but still in the same sign. So this makes him, among other things, a bit of a wild card, a renegade, a rebel, a shit disturber. These are all things that we use to describe Rahu in particular, but the nodes in general, because they're disruptors. Eclipses are extraordinary, frightening events in terms of natural phenomenon. And when someone like Trump comes on a normal political scene, he's scared the hell out of everybody, and he's certainly characteristic. We regard Sun and Mars as rulership planets. They're associated with what we call the Kshatriya class in India. Sun and Mars are both fiery planets. They occupy the angles in Trump's chart. One is the ascendant lord, the sun, and the other is the occupant of the first house, Mars. Now, in Vedic astrology, we use this concept of major planetary periods, which, you know, cut a pretty wide swath through a life and can last anywhere from 6 to 20 years of duration. Now, Trump finished his Rahu Dasha, that's the so-called major period, almost exactly upon the 2016 election day. And he's been in Jupiter Dasha now since that date, since November of 2016. Within each dasha, Jupiter dasha lasts 16 years. It can be subdivided into 9 subperiods, and they're proportioned, you know, according to, well, some technicalities I won't get into. Take my word for it. He's in the long-term period of Jupiter and a sub-period of Saturn. And these subperiods, what are called the bhuktis, one bhukti, two bhuktis, are critical because they usually represent a period of time that's sort of workable, anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. Trump happens to be in this minor period, the bhukti of Saturn. Now, Saturn in his chart has no strength. It's not in its own sign. It's not in its sign of exaltation. It is not bright by being retrograde. It does not have directional strength by being in the 7th. It's nothing. Worse, it's in a negative house. You know, we regard houses 6, 8, and 12 as being problematic. His is in the 12th. Now, symptomatic of some of Trump's, behaviors are Saturn, the 7th Lord, in the 12th house, which is the house of pleasures of the bed, raw sexuality. There it is with Venus as well. And so you get this notion of partnership and his murky relationships with women, and also potentially loss at the hands of women too, because the 12th house is associated with loss. And you see the recent trends in polls that suburban women, which basically voted Trump in 2016, are now deserting him in droves because of his behaviors, basically since the outset of his Jupiter Dasha, and especially since the outset of his Saturn Bhukti, which began in January of 2019. So for all of 2019, all of 2020, and it will go into mid-2021, Trump will be in this minor period of Saturn. Minor, it's 2.5 years long, so it's significant. It's equivalent to Saturn's passage by transit through a sign. So this is basically the problem with, and I've got it in notes over here. Saturn is ordinary / weak in the 12th. It's associated with Venus. Yeah, that's associated with women, but take note as well too. Venus is the Lord of the 10th house, and the 10th house represents power, administration, and the command and control disposition. And this is, something of a signature for a fall, because the period Lord is associated with the 10th Lord in the 12th. That's not a good prognosis for holding on to power long term. It's kind of amazing that he's done what he's done, but there you have it. Let's have a look at Biden's chart. Unlike Trump, Biden has an interesting signature for government service. Government service is often seen through activation of lords of the 5th, which represent ministry and portfolio management. Lords are occupants of the 9th, which is the legislative and lawmaking process. And lords are occupants of the 10th house, which is again back to command and control, administration, wielding power. Now, Biden as well happens to be in a Jupiter Dasha too. He's at the very tail end of his, and he is under a Rahu Bhukti, as Trump was 4 years ago, because everybody's got a different cycle depending on where the moon was at birth and how old they are. So we then examine these planets. Jupiter Dasha. Well, Jupiter is exalted in the 9th house. This is just nothing short of wonderful. Vedic astrologers regard a retrograde planet as more powerful than normal. Why? Because it's brighter than normal. In the retrogression cycle, planets are brighter. And if they are brighter, they're more visible in the sky. And if they're more visible, we lend them greater import. So this Jupiter is quite strong. It's the Lord of the 5th, and it's in the 9th. That ticks off 2 boxes around, government capacity. And then he's running the sub period of Rahu, which began just in April of 2020, and it's got about 2 years and a bit to run. It easily, sails right through the election period. So Rahu sits in the 10th house, and Rahu or Ketu will always act as a proxy for planets which disposit them or aspect them. And in Joe's case, it's an immediate proxy for the sun, which as Lord of the 10th in the 1st house is something of a signature for acquaintance with power. The ability to self-administer at least, but also to administer others. So this particular period is, pretty positive as far as that goes for him compared to Trump. Now I'm keeping my eye on my time because I've got a couple of other charts I want to talk through as well. Oh, back to Trump for a second. Here's an interesting thing. We see Trump going crazy and he's starting to unravel, and in fact has been so for a year and a half and more, I think, since January of 2019. He's really starting to act weird. As we go into this election cycle, he's getting crazier and crazier. And watch out, it's as pundits on CNN will say, when asked, what do you think of the latest thing that he just did? And almost to a man or a woman, they will say something like this: I am shocked, but I am not surprised. It's characteristic of his behavior. Anyway, watch out as we go into this fall. He's going to get crazier and really go off the rails in a major way. Why do I say that? He is in a major period of Jupiter and a minor period of Saturn. It behooves us to pay attention to the transits of those two planets, which we call the period lords. So right now, Jupiter is sidereally in Sagittarius, late Sag, while Saturn is already in Capricorn. But here's the thing, on election day, they will both be moving quite swiftly, about 50% faster than their normal average forward speed. And in fact, they are fairly fast and picking up speed. And over the next 2 months, by the end of 2020, they will be going more than twice as fast as the normal speed. And being in Trump's 6th house, which is essentially a house of enemies, internal conflicts, litigation, betrayal of partners, all that kind of stuff that could undermine anybody, they're going to be moving very quickly. And especially critical is Jupiter as it crosses from a place of dignity in Sagittarius, moving very quickly into its sign of debility in Capricorn. Things, as Trump really goes off the rails, the wheels are going to come off his vehicle as well too. Well, we see this already almost every day. Almost a day passes that we don't see more craziness. Anyway, so it's going on. Now, I like to look at the event charts as well too. And, I am very loath. This might be the only time you ever see me put up a solar rising chart, because there's almost always something better to use. But I debated with myself, what am I going to do here? I don't know what hour the polls open in Washington, D.C., or any other representative city. So I simply said, you know what? As far as Vedic astrologers are concerned, the day begins as the sun rises that day, literally at the moment of sunrise. So I just did the chart that way. Now, the 1st house always represents the incumbent, the party in power, and the 7th house represents the challenger. So right away, sun is debilitated in Libra, but so it is on every election day at that first week of November. We got to discount that. But the ascendant Lord, remember, this is all sidereal. The ascendant Lord Venus is debilitated in the 12th. Well, 12th is associated with loss. Here's the Lord in a bad house and debilitated and afflicted by an aspect from Mars, a strong Mars, I might say, and the 7th house, the opponent, is ruled by Mars. Why is Mars strong? Because it's on the opposite side of the sun, from opposite side of the chart from the sun. And so you could think of it as a moon. The moon looks full when it's opposite the sun. Well, planets look brighter when they are opposite the sun in the chart. And that is actually what happens during their retrogression cycle. So this Mars is regarded as powerful because bright. And it aspects, and it's a malefic, needless to say, and it aspects this weak benefic, which represents Trump in this instance. Now, Vedic astrologers are fond of, if not hedging our bets, checking our columns and figures to make sure everything adds up. And if we're not confident in a birth chart, As it stands, we will occasionally rotate the chart, not to a sun rising chart. I've done that here for the reasons I give, because it's election day, and that's the minute when election day begins. But if we're in doubt and we want to get a second point of view, we can always go to a moon rising chart. So if you look back here, you'll see moon at 1840 of Taurus, sidereal. And so basically now I've just rotated this chart to place Taurus as the first house, whole sign houses basically. And so the moon now is in the first house. And now remember, the first house represents the incumbent, while the seventh house represents the challenger or opponent. I have to admit, Wendy, man, I didn't think I was, whew, okay. Welcome, Wendy. So remember, the first house here represents the incumbent. Okay, you do have a fullish moon, just a few days after the full moon, and the moon is exalted. That's good. That shows, Trump has got personality to spare, and he's got his base, but it's associated with the nodal axis. And the moon in association with the nodal axis makes people crazy, or has that potential to be deranging, irregular, unpredictable, wonky, just, anyway, all kinds of bizarre stuff. But it still has strength. But Rahu is considered debilitated in Taurus. So we've got this moon associated with a debilitated Taurus, debilitated Rahu, and that corrupts it to some degree. On the flip side, the seventh lord is Mars. Mars is elevated, but more to the point, its dignity is the same as before. It's retrograde, therefore bright. And back to the ascendant, it's Taurus rising. By coincidence, Venus, that debilitated Venus, is again the lord of that ascendant. It was back here. Oh, I can't go back. I won't. And it is again in Mars aspect. So through both of these lenses, I believe that the incumbent will fail and the challenger will succeed. Now, back in spring of this year, I was on a panel for organizational professional astrologers to discuss the spring equinox, and I was glad to see Wade put that up as one of the contributing factors. Note that this is sidereal, however, rather than tropical. But the first thing that I see when I look at this is I see here's the nodal axis running through the chart, dividing the chart in two. Behold the draconic bowl. And this creates intensity, and it tends to sort of, it's like an accelerant to, a fire starter of some kind that can sort of blow up whatever it touches. And most interesting to me, as soon as I glanced at this chart, I saw Mars and Jupiter extremely close together. How close together? Wow, 10 minutes of arc. So this constitutes in Vedic astrology what we call planetary war, and it's bad for both of them. And at the time back then, when we were not talking about election, we were talking about the looming COVID crisis. And I said that this was a very poor prognosis for easy resolution of this, because if this represents the body politic, I did it for Washington, D.C. on the day of, the minute of the spring equinox. We have here sixth house. Jupiter is the sixth house lord, which is state of health and employment. Jupiter is in this planetary war. That's very bad. Second house, Mars rules the second house, finance, economics. The stock market is doing great, as Trump keeps reminding people, but people are like literally selling their furniture in order to feed their kids. It's that bad on Main Street America. Mars is lord of the seventh as well too, and public relations, foreign affairs have gone to hell in a handcart. Last but not least, Mars and Jupiter together. Third house, one of the things the third house rules is the post office and the postal system. And here you have Mars and Jupiter in a direct conflict, whether it be between, sort of corrupt philosophy or ethics and, and the people's will. You have this business going on as well too. At the time, I said, the risk for martial law and anarchy in the streets were pretty good, and there was no or early resolution to the COVID crisis. People are saying at the time, you think it'd be over in 6 months, and I said I don't think it'll be over in 2020, and thinking about it more too, this may last until 2022. Hate to be a bad news bear, but there's a lot of problematic stuff going on here. So I'm going to cut to the chase in my last 2 minutes here. My take on this is that, just back to election day here, put the moon, here it is in Taurus. By the time it gets into Cancer, think of that as the people, the constituency, the overall audience. I think within 5 days, the writing will be on the wall in terms of votes that have already been submitted and counted, those that get counted on the spot. I mean, basically they could start generating, results on the day of, but this is a peculiar year for all kinds of reasons. But I believe within 5 days of election day, the majority of votes will be counted, the writing will be on the wall, and the Republican army of lawyers who want to contest each and every constituencies results because of bogus mail-in votes or whatever, God knows what's going to happen. But I believe that Biden will win the popular vote or an electoral college by a handy margin. But back in the transition, good God, there's a shit show in a dumpster, or what they call a fire in a dumpster, coming there, because Trump is literally going off the rails. Trump and GOP governors have already declared their intention to contest results. This spring equinox signature, which to me is suggestive of civil unrest, and we see the kidnapping, the attempted almost kidnapping of the governor of Michigan just this week. It's getting really crazy. I anticipate this is going to be one horrible November and December. Interestingly, a very fast-moving Jupiter will move from Sagittarius, sidereal Sagittarius, into Capricorn, its place of debilitation. I think it's around November 20th. And then I expect things to really unravel in Technicolor, and perhaps the revolution will be televised. I don't know, we're going to see too much of it, but it looks potentially ugly. And God help America is all I can say. Okay, I have 20 seconds left. I cede it to my next presenter. Where the heck is I don't see the faces of our other participants. Okay, I gotta admit somebody. I don't see other faces to give this up to Inge.
If you unshare your screen or stop sharing, I think that makes it better.
Yep, there, that's my.
Perfect.
Sorry. Yes, there, I'm back to, let me find, there's Inge, and let me give this to her. Make host. Take it away.
Okay.